Mr. All right, we good? Great, we are rolling, as they say in the film industry. My name is Jane Newton-Small, and I'm the executive editor of the Albuquerque Journal. I am really excited to welcome you guys here today to our second town hall series. This is a series that we started a few weeks ago. We had Sam Bregman come in wearing his DA hat, and the idea is to bring leaders to you and enable you to ask questions of the leaders, enable you to either online or in person see them, ask them things, and hear our process that we go through when we have an editorial board. So these are pretty classic for us editorial boards. And I'm going to allow my colleagues to introduce themselves in a minute so you get a sense of who's asking the questions. And then eventually, when we write a story that comes out of this, you'll also see where the story comes from. You'll see, you'll be here to understand the Q&A that happened, and you'll get the background of the story that we eventually publish. I want everyone to just be aware, if you want to ask questions, there are QR codes on either side of here on the screens. Just scan the QR code with your phone and submit a question virtually. There's already a great list of, I think, 15 of them, and I'll be asking the questions that you guys submit. For those of you who are coming in online, I wanted if you can ask questions through a link in the comment section. So please feel free to submit questions throughout the entire editorial board. I'll be looking at all these questions, gathering them, and asking them when the time is right. Keep in mind, I'm not going to ask anything profane. I'm also not going to ask anything that's a little too sort of there's a word limit for these questions, so I'm not going to read off a 500-word question for you. And so just keep it brief is all I ask. And with that, I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. We'll start with Jeff down here, and then we'll introduce Duke Rodriguez.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. Good to have you in public for James' first time, second time. Anyway, I'm Jeff Tucker. I'm a columnist for the Journal and a night reader.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Ryan Botel. I'm the opinion editor at the Journal.
Dan?
And I'm Dan Boyd. I'm the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief up in Santa Fe, so got to come down to Albuquerque for the afternoon. I cover the legislature and state government and politics.
Now I just want to introduce our guest for the day, who's Duke Rodriguez. He's a Republican gubernatorial candidate, and I'm going to just give you some time to introduce yourself to the audience.
It's funny, I actually know many of the people here, and I'm very honored you came out. I actually see someone totally shocked me. I went to college with at New Mexico State University. So I think most people know of my background. I arrived in Silver City when I was about 14. Went to Silver City Middle School and high school. I then moved on to Alamogordo because we were a financially stressed family. I lived in the projects in Alamogordo, which I'm personally very proud of. Graduated from Alamogordo High School. One thing that I'm often known for is I really enjoyed running. And I've been known to run in practically every city, county, village, you name it, municipality in this state, whether it was Peñasco, Reserve, New Mexico. Most people don't even realize Reserve has a track. But I've been all over this state, had wonderful experiences. Most notably, I think most people know me as the Loveless guy for many years. I was there in the early days of Loveless, if you remember, when our campus was on Gibson, and was a wonderful time in my life. Gave birth to my son. Probably gave me the real, when I say, grown-up job. And so I'm very fond of the Loveless Hospital Clinic HMO experience that I had in Albuquerque. I also had a few other experiences you may have heard of. I was the cabinet secretary under then Governor Gary Johnson. Gary and I really didn't know each other well, but he was this gentleman I saw standing in the gym one day who happened to have bigger ears than myself. And that's kind of why I paid attention to him. And they said, that dude over there is running for governor. I said, that guy will never be governor. But as you know, long story short, Gary ran as an outsider and proved to be very successful. Kay got a race. It was an unusual race for the fact that there was an independent, but then he was elected for the second term, which turned out well. I have great admiration for Gary, and he's shown great love and support for my own candidacy. I don't know if many of you know that Gary has endorsed my run for governor and first asked me why, and I'm kind of sharing you the why, because I explained to Gary that I grew up on Medicaid. I grew up on SNAP. I grew up on many of the programs that many New Mexicans have experienced. And at that time, New Mexico faced, if you would recall, a crisis with Medicaid. We had what we called a fee-for-service model that was costing double-digit increases. I think at the rate before I joined was about a 22% increase year to year. And Gary said, can you fix it? And thankfully, the legislature, a Democratic legislature, had passed a bill. And that bill was about 3 paragraphs long, maybe 8 sentences, and it very simply said, the executive branch is empowered to introduce a managed care model, long as it protected rural care and basically assimilated Medicaid patients into the mainstream. That was basically it. Now that bill was passed for the benefit of a Democrat governor, and it sat idle for about 2 years, and it ended up in Gary's lap and says, would you, could you? Make a long story short, I had the opportunity, and I asked Gary point blank, can I do pretty much anything I want? And he kind of said, yeah. And so we converted, at the time, a Medicaid program with runaway costs. Its enrollment at that time, to give you some perspective, was about 189,000 cardholders. And we thought that was massive. Well, obviously, we did reform it. We introduced what many of y'all may recall called Salud. Yeah, Salud. And I will tell you, the only thing that the future administrations have done subsequent to that is to change the name twice. It became Centennial during the anniversary of the 100th, and then became Turquoise. I find it amazing, though, that we didn't really focus on the attributes of the program, and that was to control costs and improve access. And in fact, the program ballooned, and today you know it as the Turquoise program, which peaked at nearly, or just over, 1 million lives. Bottom line is, I've had a lot of experiences, state and private. I've been president of a New York Stock Exchange company based in Albuquerque that is no longer here. I've run and built my own companies and sold them. I had one company, we had 182 stores across North America, and we were successful in selling it to a little German company you may have heard of called Siemens. So we were fortunate to sell that. And long story short, it brings me to why now. I do believe we are a great state. I do not believe we are a poor state. I absolutely will argue with and discuss it over and over with anyone that will listen. We are absolutely a poorly managed state. And I think with a little bit of effort and refocusing on our core values, I love this. I think loveless diagnostic, the state of New Mexico, all the things that made me and the state can return to a very high level of success.
Thanks so much, Dan. Do you want to start?
Sure, I can jump in. I wanted to ask you, since the campaign started this year, you faced court challenges from a few other Republicans already about kind of your residency issues and whether you kind of meet the constitutional requirements to hold the office of governor. I think a lot of people who followed know that both those were dismissed by the judges, but now one of them is still pending in the Supreme Court. And I just wanted to ask you kind of your thoughts on those challenges being filed, and if you're still confident that you do meet those constitutional requirements.
Certainly, I had a lot of public and private opportunities to talk about residency. And I have not shied away from it, and I don't mind the debate. I think it's worth noting what has been reported and what is actually the Constitution. I've heard people say, oh, he's voted in Arizona. I've heard he's done this, and I heard he has a home in Arizona. Some of the things you've heard are true, and some of the things are absolutely incorrect. What is the most important thing is, what does the Constitution say? Bottom line, what does the Constitution say? And it's not overly complicated, but I do want to remind everybody, when the Constitution was written, I actually have a copy in my bag here I'm glad to share with people, because I value what happened at the time, because that gives us guidance as to what applies today. Constitution of Mexico's Constitution was written in 1910. and adopted upon statehood in 1912. I want you to put that in your minds for a second. It was in the days of trains, telegraph, handwritten letters. Imagine that. We didn't have voter registration. We didn't have conventions. We didn't have all the things. We didn't even have organized voting. And by the way, during that period, for those of you who want to look back at history, women couldn't vote. Native Americans couldn't vote. And by the way, for those of you who really go back in history, it was written in both English and in Spanish. How's that? So you have to go back to what did the framers mean at the time and what is the condition of governance today. What they wrote and what people have failed to point out, it doesn't talk about electors, yet that's in the Constitution. It doesn't talk about domicile, yet that's in the Constitution. It doesn't talk about residency. None of those things. Do you all realize income tax in this country hadn't even been approved? And I've heard people say, well, he paid taxes in Arizona. He paid taxes in New Mexico. It didn't exist in 1910. So 2 words were written in the section as to be governor. Some of the other qualifications are pretty straightforward. Number 1, you must be at least 30, 35 years of age. I think I qualify. You must be a U.S. citizen. Again, even though there are those who would challenge it, I have been a U.S. citizen. And the last thing is this must have, here's the key words, don't change the verbs and the nouns. Very simple. Must have, and it's R before C, if you want to remember it, resided continuously. Not continuously resided. Not where one is an emphasis of a noun versus a verb. And we knew that on the day we decided to make this run. Do we meet all the qualifications? And every attorney we reviewed and cases across this country made it clear. The answer is yes. I have resided continuously for nearly 54 years in this state. And I think our case will prove that once again. Every case that's been thrown up has been challenged and dismissed. Do I think there are others in the wing who would like to continue to sow distrust, voter confusion? Absolutely. And we will deal with those, each and every one, and still win this election.
If I could follow up on that, we have Margaret Levine, who's an audience member, who submitted a question asking, that all the evidence would support that you're a resident of Arizona, that you voted there, that you paid taxes there. What is your evidence that you have been a resident of New Mexico?
That's an interesting way of framing it. Sometimes you don't want to answer the question. They wrote it because they're making the assumption that you are a resident of only one state. What Judge Gurley said in our hearing in Aztec was, as he told the plaintiffs, you need to understand this, he can be a resident of multiple states. That's the key. There isn't this one and done. A person can have a home in Hawaii, in Arizona, in New Mexico, and hold residency. Much of it has to do with intent. Where are your principal activities? My principal businesses are exclusively in Albuquerque, in New Mexico. My family's here. They live right down the street. I built a brand new house up in High Desert in 2017. For anyone in this room who's ever gone through the process of building a house, it is not an easy commitment. So they may frame it a certain way, but the actual truth is I am a resident of New Mexico, and I can be a resident who resides and has a home in other locations.
If I could jump in on that, Duke. You got to Silver City when you were 14. You grew up in Alamogordo. You've lived continuously in New Mexico for since you were 14. Why register in Arizona?
First of all, I have seen voting records, and I'm not going to dispute them all because it's their burden to prove one or the other. Do I believe the voting records they put forth are correct? No. Do I think the fact is there were periods in this, for example, do y'all recall a little period in Mexico's history and the country's history called COVID, where we were precluded from going back and forth? I repeatedly got messages from the executive offices in this state saying, Duke, you cannot travel freely. I was told repeatedly, there are people in this room who attended secret meetings that we weren't supposed to gather at in the Albuquerque Little Theater. So at times it was because of necessity, but never did I break my relationship and my continuous residency with New Mexico.
Can I ask where you've been registered the majority of your life, Arizona or New Mexico?
If you talk about the majority of my life, I would tell you the majority of my life has been registered in New Mexico.
Following from that, Juan Valdez, who's another audience member, says, why should we listen to another Republican candidate who can't win in New Mexico and a carpetbagger on top of that?
Well, I definitely don't think you should ever listen to a carpetbagger, but if you ask why should they listen to me specifically, you have to look at my life's experiences. You have to think about, does he know what ails New Mexico? And is he able to deal with the challenges? And you all know what those challenges are. Think about it. Crime, immigration, the economy, and probably number 4 in that list, healthcare. If you think about all the areas I have lived, whether it's dealing with our education, I know what it's like. How many people in this room graduated from a New Mexico high school? Look around. I did. How many of you all been to a university in New Mexico? Yes, I did. I know our strengths and I know our weaknesses. I know how we like to blame things. I've heard candidates say that, oh, by the way, and this is a strength. 30 years ago, we were ranked 50th in education. We're still 50th in education. So I don't know where people are patting themselves on the back. I know why we are in a bad situation. I'll give you a brief example. Why you should trust me. Why you should believe this candidate is different than everyone else. I'm not going to talk about education in isolation. I'm not going to talk about crime in isolation. I'm not going to talk about all these things that ail New Mexico in isolation, because we need to understand we are in this situation because several factors have collided. Poverty, education, mental health issues, substance abuse. When those issues collide, you get the situation we have today. And our constant and consistent response has been what? It's been very simple. More programs. Our population is stagnant. Does everyone realize today our population is about 2.1 million? Would you all agree that the population 10 years ago was 2.1 million? That should scare the heck out of you. And yet during that same time, our spending at state government 10 years ago, when Susanna didn't have the luxury of oil and gas, was 5.2 billion, 5.3 billion, 5.4 billion. And our most recent budget approval with still a flat budget, a flat population, $11.5, $12 billion. Everyone's asking me the number one question I get everywhere is, where did the money go? One more little piece of information. Education. It should be on everyone's mind. 25 years ago, and I was here in New Mexico, our student enrollment statewide 25 years ago was approximately 305,000 students. Now everybody assumes that our student population has done, obviously, naturally grown. Our student population today is 305,000 students. 25 years later. But they won't tell you that 25 years ago on those 305,000 students, we spent $2.5 billion. This year we're going to spend $4.5 billion. You should ask, where did the money go? Not to results, only to new and expanded programs.
Duke, following up on that, our neighboring states are growing in population. Why is New Mexico's population stagnant, and what can change that?
Oh, that's a great question. That is my biggest belief that we fail to acknowledge. And we use this standard. We have oil and gas. We can just spend our way out of it. In the same time I've told you our student body population is stagnant, you're probably saying, but Duke, that has to do more with birth rates. We heard it was birth rates are down. Other states aren't growing, allegedly. In the same 25 years I just described to you, Texas picked up 1.5 million more students. Arizona picked up 375,000 more students. Utah grew. Colorado grew. We are the only stagnant state, and it relates to one thing, a stagnant economy. If we don't invest in our what I consider our four major lines of business in this state, oil and gas, it's a driver. The fact is we need it, we believe it, and we've been blessed with it. We don't need to apologize for it. Agriculture, we don't invest in our agriculture, we let it continue to dwindle. Healthcare, does everybody in this room recognize that our single largest employer in this state is healthcare? And you definitely want somebody who's been around it. We have about 150,000 statewide in healthcare employees. And I'm going to point out, as I did earlier this week, your largest single healthcare company, hear me out, is teetering. They don't want you to say it, they don't want to talk about it. And the reason why? Because we're stagnant. All we have is increasing Medicare enrollment, Medicaid enrollment in our fourth major sector, and we should be proud of it. National security. And when I talk about national security, I'm talking about Los Alamos Labs, Sandia Labs. I'm talking about our bases, White Sands Missile Range, Holloman Air Force Base, Cannon Air Force. Do I sound like someone who hasn't been in the state for a while? I mean, seriously. It's the biggest hoax that this election cycle, because they don't want you to know the truth of what ails this state. That's the bottom line. It gets you confused, and it gets you to spend the first portion of this conversation talking about, is your resident? If you could all join me for dinner at my house, I would invite you. It's comfortable, but it's not that big. But the bottom line is, we are stagnant because we don't invest in our lines of business. We have a most amazing sovereign fund, and you may say, can we invest in those things? Yes, but what we do is we go for the vanity projects. We go for what we think are going to be layups. One of those layups is called the Rail Runner. That has turned out to be just a real tremendous success for New Mexico, hasn't it? Or how about the spaceport? We love the spaceport. What did they have, 6 flights last year? But we don't invest in desalination. We don't improve our water quality. We don't invest in our climate. We don't invest in these areas that create jobs. Play to our strength.
Well, to that end, Emily Howard, who is the head of the Economic Forum and is here today, she submitted a question asking, in a recent poll conducted by the Economic Forum, 98% of Albuquerque area residents said local economic growth was important to them. What is your vision for a prosperous economic future for New Mexico, and how will you lead us there?
We need to see these 4 core areas as the building blocks for our future. There are some low-tech investments that we should capitalize on that is outside of these 4, but they're all complemented by the same. I have a proposal I brought forward called State of the Arts. We should be a state of the arts. There is no state in this country that is blessed more with cultural, artistic significance. Imagine this. Our rich Hispanic cultures, our rich Native American cultures, we should be the centerpiece for those arts. We can invest with very little capital in communities that you normally would not invest in, not just Albuquerque, but in Raton, in Peñasco, in Pie Town, in all the little communities. For very little capital, we can get these communities reignited. On top of that, do I believe that we should invest? Yes. In those 4 core areas, and pick a few that we should be leaders in that haven't been dominated. You may have heard we threw, and I'll call through loosely, $200 million on a roll of the dice because one legislator likes it. And you may have heard that we threw $200 million because we're going to be a leader in quantum computing. Have y'all heard about our $200 million for quantum computing? But they don't tell you that North Carolina has already invested nearly $1 billion. They don't tell you that other states are way ahead. We need to pick projects that may sound controversial, but I believe in projects that are accretive, that will add to these 4 sectors. I'm watching closely the project down in southern New Mexico with Project Jupiter. Do I think we should look seriously at AI development? Yes. Should we be fearful of it? No. Should we understand that? Think about this. If we used AI effectively and we're a leader before somebody spends $1 billion and we're trying to arrive at the party late, if we did Project Jupiter and we controlled the risk, because I'd love to be in the room and say, okay, we'll do Project Jupiter, except we must insist that you have electrical self-production. I'll do Project Jupiter because I'm a businessman. I want a desal project there. I want desal projects in 5 communities. I want them in Lee County. I want them in Eddy County. I want them in Bernalillo. I want them in San Juan. When we build those nuts and bolts on there, we create real opportunity. And believe me, whether people want to admit it today, when you look to AI, it's going to contribute, guess what? It's going to contribute to healthcare. It's going to contribute to education. It's going to contribute to national security. It's going to contribute to agriculture with more precision farming. Don't you want things that are cross-pollinating versus these one-off shots that we have consistently failed at? That's how I believe we get that vibrant community.
What does investment in those 4 key areas look like? Is that the State Investment Council prioritizing local businesses for their portfolio? Is it tax breaks? How do those investments happen?
Those investments have to happen because we prioritize. Right now, we prioritize programs. If we don't like the way that the Medicaid program is costing more, we raise the rates 22%. That's not investment, that's spending. Prioritizing and investing is a world different. You look at projects that have overflow effect. I believe in building a new stadium here, a real stadium, a $200 million plus stadium. It creates jobs. Imagine seeing across our landscape cranes. You know, I have spent some time in Arizona, if you haven't heard the rumor, but if you drive through the Maricopa area and you drive on their website, you cannot keep track of all the cranes in there. We used to be a thriving community. We used to be viewed as national leaders in healthcare long before Minnesota got recognized for it. We still own these talents. We're not stupid people. We have probably the most educated population in many ways. When you start to make these investments in AI that we support, do you know why AI is coming to New Mexico? Why they want to be based here? Because they want to do the modeling for Sandia Labs. They want to do the modeling for Los Alamos Labs. Again, putting state dollars to work that create jobs, that create capital investment, that continues to expand our economy.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in. Where would you like to build a $200 million stadium? Would you support the governor's initiative to put it at the fairgrounds?
I haven't jumped fully into where it belongs. I have a sentimental value of where the state fairgrounds is. I have a sentimental value. I think we owe a duty to optimize the land we have throughout the county. And I think that that location, there are plenty of good sites. You take Arizona, for example, they built a massive stadium. And they didn't build it in Phoenix. They didn't put it in Scottsdale. They went ahead and took the risk and took it to their west side. Sometimes we should take the risk and go to our west side and realize a major trophy asset like that doesn't have to always be in the heart of the town and increase traffic. There are ways to improve state fairgrounds without necessarily putting a stadium there.
Would you look? Are you looking at a stadium for New Mexico United or an enclosed facility that can hold conventions? What's your vision there?
In my belief, we need a full-service, year-round, retractable roof, top of the line. New Mexico can build it, we can afford it. It's not like we don't have the budget. It's not like we don't have the money. I laughed in the last year alone, and I'm a very compassionate person. I know Republicans are supposed to be, oh, they're anti this and anti that. We're not. My grandparents migrated to this country in the late 1800s. I'm a second-generation American, and I'm proud of it. We are people of compassion and care and concern. When you build that kind of facility, you're trying to enrich the entire experience here. We do need a $200+ million stadium that can enrich the entire area, not dedicated to one team. Markets shift, markets go back and forth. I'd like us to have an NBA team.
Exactly. Is a $1 billion stadium out of the question to get an NBA team?
As I was trying to say, because you're exactly right, Jeff. Last year, if you may remember, not in this current legislative session, but last year's, what was it, a 30-day session? Or 60, 60. Do you remember the crisis then? You heard from the governor, from the legislature, mental health is broken. Do we all remember that? And we created the Behavioral Health Trust Fund, and it should echo and reverberate. $1 billion. 12 months later, we haven't done a thing except tie up the money. We have $6 billion spent in unfunded capital projects. This is not we have to do this versus this. There's a great room in unspent and unnecessary spending to fund every one of these projects. It's just that we've been told over and over, our only pathway is spending.
Well, to that point, Tripp Jennings, who's a reporter with In-Depth New Mexico, says, and he's covered every governor since Bill Richardson here, he says that they've all said that they would strive to diversify the economy, improve education, fix healthcare, and they've all left without reforming any of these massive areas because it is extraordinarily difficult. What makes you different from anyone else, Republican or Democrat, who came before you? And how are all these how do you reform all of these areas when reforming even one has not been accomplished by your predecessors?
If you elect politicians, you will get political decisions. If you elect Susana Martinez, and I have great respect for her, you get a politician. You elect Michelle, and I have known Michelle for 30 years. I will tell you straight up, I sat in a cabinet meeting in Gary Johnson, and I told him 30 years ago, you need to fire her because she's going to be a problem in the future. I'm right. I am telling you, we need to get outside the box, and that sounds like, oh my God, that's so cliche. But you need a business person. You need someone who can read a P&L. You need someone who can read a balance sheet. You need somebody, you don't need Deb Holland. I'm going to say it right now because we're supposed to be polite, and we can be polite. Understand, if you want change, you can't keep doing the things we've done over and over and voting for the same cats we've done before and expect a different outcome. It's not going to happen. You need to have the courage collectively as a state and say we're going to elect someone who's built a new hospital, who's built clinics throughout the state, who's employed physicians, hired employees, knows what it's like to meet a payroll, and it's not easy doing it yourself.
Well, to that degree, Susan Billy asks, what have you personally done for the economy of the state?
That's a great question. Individually, I took on risks that no one else would take on. I took a single location in Santa Fe, for example, one little dispensary in Santa Fe, and I built 38. There was no guarantee I'd have the business. I built a farm in Bernalillo. It's a crown jewel in that community that employs hundreds of employees. Every day in this state, I've got people running around this state in vans, employed. And you know what they're not doing? They're not working at a fast food shop. I hired real people, wrote real paychecks, and took the risk. And some of those days and nights, I did not sleep because it wasn't guaranteed. But the results have proven that if we invest in our people, we are not stupid people. We are probably one of the most blessed states in this entire country. We just refuse to acknowledge, as I said early on, we are not a poor state. We are a poorly managed state. We don't have a money problem. We have a management problem. I've demonstrated individually at Loveless. You ask about what have I done individually? I pushed the system to its limits. And I used to joke, as we built new hospitals and new clinics and hired thousands of new employees, I used to joke seriously, we are going to be the most best-looking bankrupt company you ever saw. Or we're going to win. That's what it takes. We've got to push the limits. Doing the same thing over and over, electing the same kind of candidates who are running for their next job will get you exactly that.
You've talked about a little kind of your message to voters. The political reality is that Republican hasn't won a statewide race in New Mexico since 2016. How do you what's your roadmap to victory, trying to convince moderate Democrats, independents that you'll need to, if you are the nominee come November?
Well, let's look at me as a candidate. I think most people in this room would agree that I am not your blue blazer country club Republican, okay? By the number of Republicans who've tried to kick me out of the race, they can tell you probably I'm not the most popular with that ilk. I never said I wanted to be them. We came into this race with the full belief and understanding that we would disrupt the status quo. And there's nothing wrong with that. Today I had a great meeting with Republicans up in the Heights, Albuquerque Federated Republican Women, and I think they're realizing it's coming down to a choice. Do we keep doing the same thing and realize we're going to lose? For the first time, and the reason that makes it different, this is why it's going to be completely different. For those of you who have not heard this fact, I'm going to share it with you. For the first time in February of 2026, the most recent month, picture this. For the first time in New Mexico's history, registered independents declined to state now exceed registered Republicans. Let that sink in for a moment. So we're in an environment now, a non-traditional candidate can emerge. I believe in the core values of Republicans, and yet I still know some Democrats I hold in great regard. I believe the time has come that we choose candidates who push the greater good of New Mexico and not necessarily the party. Now, that's not an easy way to win a primary, but make it very clear. From day one, my advisors will hear me say this. They say, "Dude, if you do this, you won't win the primary." I'm okay with that, because I'm only in this race to win the general. If we can't win the general, why do you care about winning a second prize ribbon? If it doesn't resonate with voters statewide, I'm not interested. And so if I got eliminated during the primary, guess what? I'll be okay with it. My life will go on. Not a big deal. I'll be disappointed because I know I can do greater good for the state. So I think what makes it different is our registrations have shifted. We've become so tribal. And everyone wants to blame everyone else. Democrats hate Republicans, Republicans hate Democrats. I'm a guy that actually has good friends on both sides, and I'm okay with that. You're probably going to raise the question, he gave money to Democrats. Do you realize how silly that even sounds? I gave money to politicians. That's the bottom line, and there were more of them than of these. It's okay. I believe in giving to those that can help you grow your companies. And no one has been in more regulated industries than this guy. So I know what I have to deal with. You have to play the cards you're dealt. And I'm okay with that. So I think the scenario is perfect. I am going to emerge from this primary election as the nominee. And it is clear, and Sam Bregman can tell all the stories he wants. He's not going to win the primary. Deb Haaland is. And you are going to have a wonderful contrast very soon. A candidate who will declare they are a symbol, and a candidate like myself who will tell you, I'm a solution. Which one do you want?
To that end, there's a question from an audience member, Hope McIntosh. She asks, over the last 8 years, we've seen continued and rising conflicts between the governor's office and the state legislatures. Assuming that the Democrats will retain control of the legislative branch, how specifically would you work across the aisle to get your priorities done with our senators and representatives?
At the risk of putting myself out there and being criticized further for it, I've worked with speakers. I worked with the Republicans, and Nate Gentry and his group had control of the legislature, and I enjoyed it. We had a great time. But I've also dealt with Brian Egoff. And I think Brian Egoff has done more good and more damage than practically any speaker we've ever had. He gerrymandered it in a way that he had a straight face and told you, I'm going to make it more biased and more favorable for Democrats. And he did, to his credit. And that's a smart guy that knew exactly what he's doing. But I've also even hired him as an attorney. because he was a smart guy. When you talk about working with the legislature and talking with the governor's office legislature, one of the dynamics that's missing today, the legislature will not push back on the current governor, and the governor will not push back on the legislature, because they're technically aligned. Our history has proven when there's a certain amount of what I call, very nice phrase of putting it, creative tension. When there's a certain level of creative tension between the legislature and the executive branch, it is a good thing. Because the executive branch hasn't used something in a long time that I've advocated that I am looking forward to using. I have a big box of ink pens that I haven't used in years, and I'd like to use them as a veto. If the legislature continues to do things which is only to spend and expand programs, everyone seems to have forgotten we have the veto pen. We have the right to say no. Do not cross-go, do not collect $200, take it back downstairs and bring us something that is in the best interest of New Mexicans. I think a veto pen would reintroduce into the current environment will prove most effective.
Speaking of the legislature did pass some bills related to healthcare reform, medical malpractice changes, joining some healthcare worker compacts. What do you think will be the effect of those changes, and what are your thoughts on them?
I'm sorry, did you talk about healthcare reform? I am disappointed in what they've done with malpractice. It's charming. It's amazing that it took 7-8 years to get to some problem that they created themselves. And so now we're supposed to do a victory lap like we were supposed to do last year over Behavioral Trust Fund, and the year before called the Healthcare Affordability Fund. And the point is, it's all window dressing. By the time that gets to the governor, it's watered down, it's been defanged, the governor signs it, they have a press conference, y'all report it, and it sounds great, and the average listener, viewer, thinks it's true. It's not true. The malpractice reform, no one told you, because I used to pay for malpractice premiums. I, imagine this, hired doctors, hundreds of doctors, paid salaries to doctors, paid malpractice premiums, got those bumps in malpractice rates. Those malpractice rates aren't going to be effective for years. Those actuaries are going to say, hey, did you see Michelle signed it, the legislature passed it? Let's drop their rate 60%. What? We've already said they're too high. They don't roll rates back. You'll see rates go back after the tail, as we call it, 36 months, shows less claims. It's not going to happen. So it's not going to resolve the problem. All these fixes have been nothing more than window dressing. And I think there's a better way to do it. Might scare you, but it means doing things differently. Has anybody ever answered the question, be very honest with you, why don't you hear malpractice claims problems over at UNMH? They employ a lot of doctors. Practically everyone in this room won't know the truth that UNMH and its hospitals are not subject to malpractice. And everybody goes, what? Yes, because they're subject to the Tort Claims Act. And no good lawyer, they see a customer, a patient come in and say, this was done to me. First question, they said, which hospital? They say UNMH. Goes, never mind, not interested. Done at Presbyterian and Loveless, I'll sue them. There are built-in reasons why we have the outcomes that we have. I would push, believe it or not, an affiliation, a relationship, legal or otherwise, that allow Presbyterian physicians to be subject to the same Tort Claims Act. It will do more in 1 hour than the entire session did the entire time. I've talked about what we're facing in New Mexico is extreme, but it's not unique. Other states have had these problems. As soon as our story came out about our solutions, right below my story is a story of Providence Healthcare. They're facing challenges with their health plan. They put it on the market, they're going to sell it off. It has about 500,000 members. I will argue Presbyterian should not be running a health plan. There are plenty of very capable, good managed care companies who could manage it more cost effectively and be more successful at it.
In a press release Monday, you said Presbyterian was an organization on the verge of collapse, with $1 billion in operating losses over the last 3 years and a recent credit downgrade. And then you mentioned how integral Presbyterian is, with 1 in 4 people in the state covered in the plan. But what really got me was your proposed solution. If we could talk about that for a minute. You said it might sound radical, but hear me out. We have to explore a partnership or even a merger between Presbyterian and the University of New Mexico hospital system. And you mentioned the tort claim. So is that a conservative proposition to take over a private healthcare company?
It is in no way making it a government control. It is trying to optimize the assets that we control. 70% of Presbyterian's revenues, and I love Presbyterian, let me get the record straight. It is a tremendous asset to this state that we should not lose. But ignoring the reality that 70% of Presbyterian's revenue are government financing. It is near a government hospital, 70%. I see faces going, that's not possible. It is government funded as much as UNMH is. Now, what many advanced healthcare states have recognized is to protect those assets, they've gotten them to focus on key things. I want Press to focus on bringing cost of healthcare down and making it more accessible. I can pick on them and say, well, Jeff, what if because I can give you the shock value and say, what if I told you that they have 15 executives in 2024 who made over $1 million and one made $4 million? I'm a little concerned. I used to run a hospital, okay? I've seen these salaries balloon to levels I don't think was the intent of protecting the population. Many of those things, like running a health plan, you shouldn't be on-the-job training. There are those who could do it better. You can sell a nonprofit 501c3 health plan for an enormous sum of money, which you can then endow for indigent care, endow for low-income care. We have to realize we are a small state, a stagnant state. Imagine that. We have all our eggs in one basket. It's the most important thing that we realize what that basket looks like and the ability for that basket to survive.
You also include a press release. Presbyterian Healthcare Services is a nonprofit corporation, which means its sell assets or accounts could potentially be used to establish a community-based trust dedicated to guaranteed care and long-term stability. Wouldn't that wouldn't be a government takeover?
Absolutely not. I don't believe in government-controlled healthcare. What it means, and when I talk about guaranteed health care, any care that is postponed till later, please understand, is expensive care. If you wait till they get in the ER or they medically crash, it is very expensive. When I talk about guaranteed health care is, and here's the real shocker, and I'm supposed to not say these things, I, for example, if given the choice, would prioritize primary care over building abortion clinics. If you don't take care of people up front, then there are going to be bad medical cases later on. I know that can be controversial, but the importance is about investing in primary care. It is a tremendous return on the dollar. In this last year, and you talked about the $1 billion of operating losses in Presbyterian over the last 3 years. What's interesting about those operating losses, $500 million of it came up in the last quarter. It's accelerating, not decreasing. And yet at the same time, you all recall what happened in Santa Fe with Nexus. Dan was there. We built a 100,000 square foot medical specialty group there, and it collapsed within 12 months. In Massachusetts, we've seen healthcare systems the size of Presbyterian collapse in 12 to 18 months when they ignored the signs. In the last year, in Albuquerque, have you not valued the price tag of UNMH's new critical care tower and Presbyterian's new tower? Between those two, they spent over $1 billion on a non-growing patient population. Who do you think is going to pay for that? You are as taxpayers.
So to that end, I have a question from Carolyn Ingram. Our state's healthcare system is failing. We lack access to care, and the majority of the population gets care through Medicaid. Presbyterian is struggling financially. What do you propose to help get the healthcare system back on track? And I just want to add that particularly for the cuts to Medicaid that are coming, how do you anticipate and mitigate those?
The cuts that are coming to Medicaid. That's a good one, because I really understand what people say. But I want you to look at the actual experience. If I had a chart, I would draw it. I love drawing on boards. In the last 5 years, and Healthcare Authority will share the data with you. Actually, I filed a lawsuit against them because they didn't give it to us already. We asked them several basic questions. How much did you pay the managed care companies for the last 5 years? I challenge anyone at this table to ask them, because it should be relatively simple. How much did you pay the last 5 years, and how many lives did you cover? And what you're going to see is, prior to COVID, we were at about 600,000 or 700,000 members. At COVID time, do you all recall that we just kissed 1 million Medicaid members? And since COVID, the enrollment, because they went back and started verifying eligibility, we started verifying all the things, because we took down all the guardrails. And now we put the guardrails back up, and the enrollment's going from 1 million to 900 to 800. I think the latest number's down at 750. So you're telling me we lost 250,000 members? It's not true. We paid for those members, but they weren't actually getting care. And at the same time, your managed care, your hospital systems had the biggest loss everywhere, ever. So here's the membership going down. You don't mind me drawing this here in the air. Look at the spending. It's gone complete opposite. Wouldn't you expect, as enrollment drops 25%, that spending should have gone 25%? But it grew 50%. We just kept writing the checks. And so when we asked them, tell me how many lives you had, how much you paid for, I think so far, Christina, they've delivered us, what, several thousand pages of paper without giving us the answer? Because they said, Duke, you go figure it out. Yes, and we sued them because they know the answer. They don't want to tell you that they made a mid-year and year-end rate adjustment on those rate cells to prop up these healthcare systems. But now that we're talking about it, we can't prop them up anymore. And so now more likely they're going to stumble and fall. And they're going to have to make decisions very quickly to prop this system back up.
A sort of separate note, but sticking with healthcare, we had a question from Roger W. Shannon, who says that he reserves the title Duke for the likes of John Wayne and the Duke of Earl. But the question is related to cannabis. How does one determine if a person is using medical or recreational cannabis? And are you aware that in autopsies of crash victims on just I-25, 8 out of 10 had cannabis in their brain and nervous systems? Did your cannabis millions get you out of the question of the residency and legal voter status, legal voter rights in Arizona?
State the specific question, because I'm not sure I heard it.
I think I'm going to cut off the last part. Just the question of, like, are you aware that autopsies of crash victims on I-25, 8 out of 10 had cannabis in their brain and their nervous systems? The idea that there's, is there really a healthy and good way to sell cannabis that doesn't harm people?
I think there's actually, because I've been asked practically every meeting I go to, Duke, I have a real difficult time with the fact that you sell cannabis. And I'm amused with that because we didn't start this journey moving into adult use. And you have to always put into perspective, and I'm sorry for the context, but you have to understand this. There's a lot of different things we can and cannot do, but you also need to understand each of those things come with parameters to do it right and to do it wrong. We had a vibrant medical program that we were very proud of. People forget that there were 145,000 medical card holders before we went to this adult use program. 145,000, by the way, they are voting adults, and they're probably independents. And that program was well managed, and we had a select number of locations across the state. The big question you're asking now, because I don't have those autopsy numbers, which I doubt are correct, there are countries who've been involved in medical cannabis exploration long before this country. I probably made more trips than anyone in this room to Israel. and I met with the gentleman himself, Dr. Raphael Meshulam. Dr. Raphael Meshulam discovered, hear me out, THC. Dr. Meshulam discovered CBD, and he's a university president, professor emeritus at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I sat across the table, no different than this, and he says, dude, this is not a wacko guy. This is a guy who said, medical cannabis is healthy and good for people. We have, I won't go into all the science, but he says it works. It works for cancer patients, it works for patients suffering from seizures, children, it works. What fails is when we take a system that worked and we abort it. And we basically set aside all safeguards and make it something that wasn't intended. We are the only state in the country. So you're wanting me to defend cannabis, I can't defend the way it's done today. Meaning, we're the only state in the entire US that licenses dispensaries without inspecting them. Let that sink in. We had applicants who submitted an application to the state, and they put on the top of the application the name of their company, and it was called Weed on Wheels. They told you it was a van, and the state licensed them until we told them it's illegal. They said, you're right, we'll shut that one down. Then we had another one who filed an application called Weed Shack. They told you it's a shack that they're selling weed out of. What we do in New Mexico is unlike anything in the country, so don't take our failures as an indictment against the program. What we have here is does everyone understand? We went from 35 licensees to 3,500 licenses. Does everybody understand that there are more dispensaries in New Mexico than there are Starbucks, Burger King, and Taco Bell combined? Okay. That's not the fault of cannabis. That's the fault of Santa Fe. That's not the bill we drafted. They gave me the bill they wanted. That's the problem.
So what are those fixes? Is the state, do they take back some of those licenses, cap them? What are the solutions?
It took us great courage to fix our liquor license. Y'all remember the debate on liquor license? Can't take them away. They're like gold. They're a lottery ticket. My colleagues in Canada say, dude, do you think what we've done is right, or are you going to hurt us? I'm going to do what is in the best interest of New Mexicans. Not the best interest of just Republicans or Democrats, but what's in the best interest of New Mexico. A program that is safe, that is tightly monitored. It is, until change, it is still a Schedule I drug. Okay, it's going to be moved likely to Schedule III. But while it's a Schedule I, we need the safeguard to keep it out of the hands of children. We need to make sure packaging is appropriate and doesn't induce children. There are a number of natural protections that other states practice. These are not real secretive things to do. It is basically do what we've always supposed to do. Take all of this out of control, bring within some responsibility. Will people drop out of the system? Yes. Will we put a moratorium on new licenses? Absolutely. We're going to do the things that it takes to bring this program under control so it's not on every street corner.
Along this line, would you divest or step down from Ultra Health if you're elected?
One thing I'm very proud of is we built a very educated leadership team. I would be honored to either create some Chinese wall, put it in a blind trust, and let them manage it. I feel totally confident they can do it, and I know that I can give guidance that not only benefits the industry as a total, but doesn't compromise my need to be independent. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think I can exercise that control. I've been doing this now for over a decade. I'm a little tired of it, and I think there are good people that can manage it successfully. I'm okay with that outcome.
Sarah Lee in the audience has a follow-up question of how do you plan to combat the ongoing drug problem in Albuquerque?
Earlier, I do think it's worth repeating. When you think about the open use of drugs on Central Boulevard, when you think about the fact that we've had such open borders with fentanyl, you start to wonder, is it that hard to fix? I'm going to tell you, it's not. we have to enforce the laws that we have. We need to stop the revolving door of the way we treat crime in this state. We need to deal with juvenile justice. I believe I lived in a time when our average prison population in this state was about 10,000 inmates. Right now we're running at about 5,000 or 6,000. You can't tell me that we suddenly had a cure to crime. I have dispensaries in still a great number of cities across this state. I feel crime every month. For the longest time, we were experiencing about 1 break-in a month. I would get a call from one of my staff members, usually at 2 or 3 in the morning. Some were funny calls. In Santa Fe, for example, to give you a real story, a criminal got stuck in the HVA vent in the middle of a snowstorm on the roof. It wasn't difficult to locate him. In every other case, they've broken in, and I've often said we should leave the doors unlocked and leave a sign, take what you want, just don't destroy the building. But every one of them shows up, they tear the front door open, they're on camera, they give the middle finger to the camera, they take what they want, and they just destroy the building. For the entire 10 years that I've had Ultra Health, we've never had one person prosecuted. Not one. They said, do you file 5,000? So I get back to enforcing the laws we have. For those of you who may not know it, I used to be chairman of the Juvenile Parole Board for New Mexico. And I was honored that the governor asked me to do it because I wanted to see, why does our system fail our kids? And I learned very quickly, once every couple of weeks, they would bring me a stack of folders of each parolee kid up for parole, a stack of them. And they told me, Duke, and I would do the faithful thing and look through what Johnny did, what Jose did, what Susie did. And they said, you're not understanding. You have to let them go because we need to make room for the next kids arriving. And I said, that's what we do? That's it, folks. And we just keep revolving, releasing, and bringing new ones in. It used to not be that way. We enforce the laws. I believe that we need to deal with the encampments on Central. And I'm going to hear, oh, by the way, you're going to get sued. Have you not heard that I'm used to getting sued? I have sued the state probably more than anyone in this state. I've received writ of mandamuses against the state, enforcing them to issue licenses when they refuse to issue licenses. We will sue them, we will be sued, and we will defend ourselves. Because our duty is to the greater population. It is not necessarily just to homeless people. I've told you before and to other groups, most people don't realize that 1/3 of the homeless in our state have been through the CYFD system. Does that not tell you why? Either as foster children or their kids in the program. Because we dump them on the street when they turn 18. I saw a story in this morning's Albuquerque Journal that we just opened up a new $17 million, 42-bed for young adults. Do you realize the price tag of that is about $400,000 to $500,000 per bed? You might as well buy them a house. Allegedly, we have 3,000, they call it what, point in time? The number of unhoused individuals allegedly is between 3,000 point in time or 13,000, depending upon whose number you want. Do you realize if we bought those 3,000 people all a bed like they would like, that's $1.5 billion. Do you wonder why I think we can get rid of gross receipts tax and state income tax? It's how we prioritize. If you do the crime, you do the time. We should offer them assistance where we can. If they need mental health, we should offer it to them. If they need substance abuse treatment, we should be offering it to them. I have lived in a family that has suffered. I've been in a house when a drug raid occurred. It's not a good feeling. But I also know there are people that really will accept the help given the chance. But for those who continue to violate the norms of your community, they must be held accountable.
Well, to that end, we had 3 attendees who want to know, what is your plan to fix homelessness in Albuquerque? Sarah Lee, Selena Gomez, and Danielle Wilson.
Homelessness is the same issue I tried to emphasize, and I would like to try to articulate it a different way so it becomes very clear. Homelessness is when you see poverty, education failure, substance abuse, mental health. When they collide, you get homelessness. Think about it. It's not that complicated. You get crime. The surest way is to deal with each of those, not individually as silos, but realize that they overlap. If our young people could see that there were opportunities for them to improve their lives, jobs out there, don't you think that they would then reach for those opportunities? Our population is stagnant. Long as our economy is stagnant, you are just going to have to do what? Spend more money with no results. Until you sincerely commit to dealing with all of those things in tandem, you will not fix it. Sam Bregman being crime 24/7, Darren White doing the same, is not going to work. You need to completely commit to having a vibrant economy. I promise your retailers will be happy, your publishers of the local newspaper will be happier, the radio stations, everyone will benefit. But until you accept that reality that they cannot be solved independently, things will remain exactly the same. And in 8 years, whoever, if it's not me, you will be talking about the next gubernatorial candidate about why we're still 50th in education, #1 in crime, and why you have people showing up in the middle of the night in your neighborhoods throwing rocks onto your roof to see if anybody's there.
Following up on your point on CYFD, Marcus Ortiz asks, how do you plan on fixing what's going on at CYFD?
I do not believe that our employees in CYFD want negative outcomes. I think they want our children to thrive. I do. I think they react to the resources given to them and the mandates by their leadership. I have been in a household where a sister-in-law of mine was a foster parent. I saw her take some of the most damaged children, babies, who had the category of failure to thrive. Everybody familiar with failure to thrive? That's what happens when you get placed in a foster home. Child demonstrates failure to thrive. And I've seen the same child labeled failure to thrive within a matter of weeks and months gain weight, being loved, being hugged, being treated well. And in those days when that worked, we didn't give that powerful incentive we called reunification. Everyone familiar with reunification? The theory is built upon that the household that they came from is the best household for them ever. Sets aside the fact that there's a drug addiction going on in that household, sets aside that there's been abuse in that childhood, that it's apparently the theory is that we must reunify them with that household. That has failed, folks, and we need to get over it. We need to realize the priority within CYFD is the protection and valuing our children. And that means we are never supposed to send out a signal that we put kids back in homes of known abusers and pedophiles. We're not supposed to have children sleeping in the offices of CYFD. What is the message behind that? And then we issue a press release saying, effective March 31st, we will no longer have children sleeping in CYFD offices, as though it's successful. Let me just go on a little personal mission. We send all the wrong messages about how we value children. And you may say, Duke, that's taking advantage of two things. Number one, let's talk about Jeff Epstein. Just for a second. That happened under our watch. And rumors were already out there. And there were a good number of political leaders that went out there with their hand out, taking contributions from something they said, this looks funny. Well, when you saw them moving petroglyphs from their natural placement and use them as guards for a driveway, you knew these are not going to be good people. I just recently got sued by a good Republican, John Rockwell. He's on the petition. James Mays. And I wanted to know what my complainants, who they were. And I get the file, and I look up the name, and I go, I don't know this attorney because I have been in New Mexico for 54 years, resided continuously. I looked it up to say, who is this person? Because I don't know this lawyer. And I find out, it's public record, he wants to sue me, sue me. He's a convicted, he pled guilty twice to sexual penetration of a 12-and-a-half-year-old girl. What does it say when Republican leaders pick these kinds of attorneys? That person, A, should not have a license, and B, shouldn't be supported in any way. We should send a signal that our kids matter more, and yet we don't do it. Now you may say, Dukes, that's not tasteful. Hurting our kids is not tasteful.
To that end, David Foster asks, how do we move education in New Mexico from 50th to 5th?
Theoretically, if I'm supposed to give the answer people expect, I'm supposed to tell you, well, we could follow the Mississippi model, or have you seen the Virginia model? Because they went from, those are the things you're supposed to say. We got ourselves in this mess, not overnight, but we've managed to maintain this mess very consistently for many years. So we clearly know what we do repeatedly doesn't work. Everybody agree to that? We know it doesn't work. I think we have a once in a very rare opportunity. I'm not going to use, we're going to do the moon shot that you hear at every State of the Union in New Mexico. It's going to be another moon shot. I'm going to tell you that there's a new technology emerging, AI. And I know we're supposed to be scared that the robots are going to take over and run us all away. I tend to believe that saying this is a new window of opportunity with AI. AI is going to benefit how we do agriculture in this state. Imagine precision farming that can track the amount of water, the right time to use the light, to do all these things. AI is going to play a role in how we deliver health care. Imagine the amount of data that AI will compile, so the next time I ask the healthcare authority to show me what you paid and how much you paid them, they bring me this 11,000 stacks of paper. I'm going to feed it into the AI system and say, surprise, I actually know the answer. AI is going to place a role in education. If we were really committed to making sure our kids this time get a real chance to succeed, we will introduce AI sooner than any other state has ever done. We would make sure their learning is supported and facilitated through AI, because they will be more prepared. We won't have to live with how bad we were 35 or 50 years ago. We're going to now live to how good we can be over the next decade. Imagine that. AI is going to play a special role in New Mexico with national security. Most people forget why they want to be here. They want to be here because they want Sandia Labs to hire them. They want to be here because Los Alamos Labs might hire them. They want to be here because White Sands Missile Range might hire them. I've said over and over, how do you fix education? How do you fix homelessness? How do you fix any of these things, the economy? You play to our strengths. No more moonshots. No more trust funds, no more behavioral trust fund, no more health care, no more PR, no more press releases, except mine.
KRQE's Jessica Garote asks, following up on CYFD, do you agree with taking the power away from the governor to appoint a CYFD secretary as pushed by some lawmakers this year?
Well, I think the reason they would want to take this governor's authority over it because it's been a complete failure. I would gladly relinquish that authority if this state doesn't see significant progress in my first term.
Moving on to another issue, Rhiannon Samuel, who's here as well, who's the head of NAOP, asks, New Mexico is in a housing crisis. As governor, what steps would you take to address it?
I've seen activities in a number of states. We can certainly adopt, we can trim around the edges, but I'm amused about all the discussion about housing. I would like to have a real housing crisis. I really would. A housing crisis because our population is growing, our economy is vibrant. It's amusing that we keep talking about this housing crisis, and yet our population's been stagnant. So I think we like it because it's a popular thing to say, but there are things we can do around the edges to make our current housing challenge, not a crisis, housing challenge. We can allow multi-family units on certain lots. We can put what we call in Hawaii, there are hohanas, in other places there are casitas. It's a guest house on your back property that allows it to be 400 to 1,000 square feet, which allows residents to have that. It's a good thing. We're going to have to increase the density where we can. I also believe the state has a role, and I strongly believe in what I call a housing fund that allows youngers under the age of 30 to help them secure their first down payment. And we don't ask for interest payments during that same time. We have enough money. Have you not heard about our rainy day fund? It's approaching, what, 72 billion, second largest sovereign fund, and you may have noticed that oil and gas prices are up. We may soon have the largest rainy day fund in this entire country. And for those who haven't noticed it yet, it's raining like hell outside, all right? So I do think that we have plenty of capital to invest in housing and in these projects, in these solutions. But investing is different than spending. Get that straight. The spending we do in Medicaid doesn't result in new buildings. The spending doesn't result in new jobs. I'm saying invest in our people, and our population. Invest in our people, invest in our population.
Speaking of investment, Susan Billy asks, what are you going to do about highways and roads throughout New Mexico?
Fix them.
That's an easy one. Mimi Stewart, thinking of other politicians, asks, climate change is transforming our state and we are seeing less water, high temperatures, and now year-round campaign against wildfires. How would your administration try to lower the greenhouse gas emissions that are ruining our air, health, and way of life?
Hi, Mimi. And yes, I contributed money to Mimi. I'm not a climate denier. Not sure I'm supposed to say that, but I'm not a climate denier. I know the challenges the climate is facing. I know about greenhouse gases, and I realize that we need to be responsible. The best answer I can tell you is I don't think it has to be one or the other. Whatever they call that last bill, clear horizons, it almost wants to negate one industry over another. We are first and foremost a very blessed state for having tremendous natural resources. It's the right hood of our population, and we should respect and be glad. Does everyone understand what a formidable position New Mexico is by being the second largest producer of oil and gas in this country? Only to Texas? Heck, I've suggested that we find a new energy czar and not place them in Santa Fe, not put them in Albuquerque, but put them down in either Carlsbad, Artesia, or Roswell, who can capitalize and do better with the resources we have there. Harness that like we've never harnessed it before, but use that richness to continue to support protections against wildfires, protections against climate challenges. It's coming. Have you noticed how dry and hot it's been lately? We're one of the few states will have the resources to mitigate those risks. Those risks are not going away, and it's not going to come from passing one bill in the legislature that's watered down. I believe investing in solutions that look to, as Native Americans would say, planning 7 generations forward.
One of the most common topics and letters to the editors that we get right now has been on the proposal for Blackstone to acquire PNM. PNM's met with us. They seem, they say that they need more capital in order to do the things that are required of them under certain laws. Is there anything you would do to try to change the direction of our electric utility in New Mexico?
I'm trying to figure out a polite way of doing that because my people tell me I don't smile enough. In this room and in this state, We have probably the biggest decision point we've had in decades. And these kinds of questions are going to be presented. What's our role with P&M? I personally, because I'm just an inquisitive and I think sometimes smart person, a businessman, willing to look at all sides, give me the best data. Don't just tell me I feel, I think, I want. Give me the best data. I would love to be in those conversations. For those of you who don't know it, as I said earlier, I was president of a New York Stock Exchange company. You have to understand, as the president of an NYSE company, no offense to state operators, state actors, we're generally smarter than they are, okay? And so you get a state operator who's sitting there thinking, does this make sense for the people in New Mexico? A regulator who was elected, never did a transaction that large. You need a governor who gets to sit in the room and say, wait a minute, I'm willing to evaluate this because you know what? I might want to buy it myself. Show me how it does greater good for my voters. Show me how it does greater good for my residents. Then we'll make the decision. And by the way, I want you to throw in 5 desalination clinics, 5 desalination facilities in the state. I want you to throw in more dollars invested in rural health care. We can make these packages attractive where we can invest and bring out outside money into New Mexico. We can. But you have to have the know-how of understanding the areas we need their commitment. I need you, Blackstone, to say this. You're going to put forward in early childhood education $100 million a year. That way we don't have to pass the pretend little universal child care bill, okay? You have tremendous assets here, leverage them. Blackstone's goal is to get it at the lowest price possible. Your governor's job is to make sure that they get it at the optimal price that benefits the most New Mexican at that time.
I wrote a column back in August kind of encouraging you to jump in. Seems so long ago, doesn't it?
It does.
I said, I'm looking for candidates with vision, substance, new ideas, and a proven track record of success. And I think that your ideas for getting rid of the income tax and GRT are surely hit those. But if we did get rid of those income revenue sources, would it affect programs like universal child care?
First of all, I am very concerned that universal child care as drafted today will be more expensive than anyone has told folks to this point. So, but at the same point, we have demonstrated a repeated ability to fail at getting these things properly launched, like the Behavioral Trust Fund. It's supposed to cost us $1 billion. Hasn't done anything. My hope until I become governor is that nothing really happens with universal child care until I can get there and fix it and be truthful about what we are buying. If we are buying a $600 million or $1 billion albatross, let's admit to it and make that decision. If it really is cost savings, which I don't think it is, and this gets back to my earliest conversation, it's about priorities. I think putting a early child care program together by an outgoing governor who wants to claim that she was the first one that did it and then won't be here to find out how much it really costs is a complete sin.
Is it a check that New Mexico can't cash, a promise that can't be met?
Jeff, I don't know, but my gut is telling me more likely the answer is yes.
And the other thing is the number of providers. There's so few in the rural areas of the state. How does the state meet that obligation?
The genie is out of the bottle. For those of us who've been around the block a few times, and again, I must remind you, I've resided continuously in New Mexico for 54 years. I will tell you that when the government becomes the primary payer sponsor, rates go up immediately to a new market rate, which then it basically destroys the free market. I think that's what we're creating. If you've looked at real estate in this state, retail space, every broker out there will tell you, I've got calls all day long. If you don't take this property, there's going to be a future child care wanting that suite. That's not a healthy environment. That's an artificial market. And that market ultimately means it will crash.
Are faith-based organizations a solution to the dearth of providers?
I do believe in our faith-based organizations. I believe strongly. I think there is obviously a real separation of state and church, and I recognize and represent it. But what happened to the basic truth of our churches and our faith taking care of our people in need? Right now we've said we don't need those faiths and we don't need that spiritual leadership. Don't worry, we'll just pass another program and spend more money. I don't think that's necessarily a good approach.
Okay.
On economic development, the outgoing head of area, Danielle Casey, her recommendation was to decouple the head of economic development in that agency from being a gubernatorial appointee and make it its own independent agency. Would you do that as governor?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because if I'm governor, which I fully intend to make the effort to get to that goal, I completely want to have a very engaged hand, mind, and effort in economic development in this state. It would be foolish for me not to exercise that leadership.
Anyone else have any other questions in the panel? I have one last one, if that's it.
I've got one more too.
Okay,
Another political question, but whoever wins the Republican nomination will inevitably be linked to President Trump in the general election, and wanted to see how you will respond to that if you are the nominee, and kind of how you would distinguish yourself to voters from the president.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist in this state, and we have lots of rocket scientists, thankfully, to know that if you look at state after state, New Jersey, Virginia, Texas, local races, the whole bit, races that the president did show tremendous poll strength, plus 15, plus 22, are not like that anymore. That shouldn't shock people. Changing an entire environment the way he has is going to disrupt a lot of folks. I will tell you from my standpoint, I have trouble sometimes with the way he says things. I have trouble with the way he demonstrates certain conduct. I think his political intuition is very effective, very effective. But I don't think that everything we publicly hear is just him. He's got underlings, he's got a very large system. I think some of his own people fail him. But with that being said, I just introduced a term earlier called creative tension. I don't object to having creative tension between the governor's office in New Mexico, myself, and the White House. I don't think that's an unhealthy thing. I think it is an unhealthy thing when you hear a candidate saying, I'm going to be a brick wall to the administration. Let's be very truthful with just the people in this room, if no one else wants to hear it. There is no state in the union that is more dependent upon federal dollars than New Mexico. Medicare, Medicaid, the largest share of our oil and gas royalties, our military bases, our national labs. Trying to say a brick wall is an effective way to communicate is wrong. I will not be a pushover. I will make sure the interests of New Mexico goes first. I will encourage compassion when it's due, but I'll protect the borders when necessary. I will stop fentanyl, but I'll do the things that are necessary. I went to see the RGA, Republican Governors Association, long ago when Jeff first said, Duke, would you think about running? Is he going to jump in? Now look where we are. We started off with 11, Jeff, 11. We got down to 6. We got down to 5, and in the last 7 days, we dumped 2 more off. We're down to 3. I think we're down to the final 3. This is it, folks. I like the mix of the 3. I think New Mexicans will have a good choice. If it wants to stay with the past, with what I will describe honestly as recycled, rinse and repeat candidates, you'll have that choice. I don't think New Mexico will make that choice in the primary, and then we'll get to Deb. And the reality becomes, for the next 4 years, you want a governor, as I told the RGA, and they said, Duke, can you tell other future governors this? Because they said, would you talk to them? Because they said, you're the only guy that says He understands Medicaid and can tell the White House how to do it better. He's the guy that knows the economy that can tell the White House how to do it more responsibly. He's the guy that can talk about immigration in a way that can be effective. I get a kick out of it when people in Massachusetts are talking about immigration. I don't know how close they are to El Paso, but I know how close we are. The fact is, we had programs like the Bracero programs, where we had workers come across that we need to work our dairy farms, work our alfalfa fields, to pick our green chili. I would like to be not just one governor, I'd like to be the governor that communicates most effectively, most intelligently for New Mexicans. And I think you can accomplish the goals of the White House and the needs of New Mexico with good communication, which is not a brick wall.
Does the surge of independent registrants and the new law that will be in effect for the first time this election, allowing independents to vote in the primary without declaring a party affiliation, make you the most viable candidate in November?
You know, when I was planning and thinking about, I talked to the RGA to see what they would tell me. I kind of said I need three things to fall into place. First, I needed Jeff to encourage me. We got that one done. But the second one, seriously, and I told folks this, I will not run unless we have a semi-open primary. There's no way I can win with a purely core-only Republican, core-only Democrat. We need to realize this state has now been divided where independents are no longer an ignored third party. They're right there in the mix. If a candidate like myself, not your blue blazer country club Republican, obviously, will need that kind of support to win the general. That happened, and by the closest of margin. And I told Republican leaders in the legislature, do you have the votes? And they said they did. And most of you may not remember, it came down to 2 votes. And they said, they called me up and said, Duke, you got your bill. Now we have to have the governor sign it. Thankfully, she signed it. And it basically is a fatal flaw. Number 3, I needed the Supreme Court to make a ruling. I filed a lawsuit against the governor, trying to define the rights of a line item veto. Can she strike more than just numbers? Can she strike words? We had a well-intentioned, well-written complaint, and most people may not believe it. I wanted the Supreme Court to say the governor does have the right. I didn't want to win that lawsuit. And the Supreme Court did the right thing and said, not our fight, looks like the governor has authority. Do you realize how much the weights have changed in favor of a governor? I get to be very good at surgically striking words and amounts, and it's going to change the entire dynamic of leading this state.
How much of an impact do you think the independents will play in both the primary and the general?
We obviously don't have any records or history of how the independents are going to turn out. We know how they've historically turned out when they were not of significance. I looked at the data of where we were 4 years ago, because we might as well look what happened 4 years ago. What happened in the interim? If you're curious, here's my thought process. 4 years ago, Mark Ronchetti ran. We can talk about the good and the bad. He'll tell you he did everything right. I'll tell you he did not do everything right. But he will tell you that it was very difficult, and he lost statewide by 6 points. And he had many counties not show up. Lee County, some in the oil patch were good, strong Republican because they felt he ignored them. Many of them said at the state convention he gave them the middle finger because he wouldn't fight for delegates. Some of it's deserved, some of it's not. I think we have a better candidate today than we had 4 years ago. I also know what's happened in the interim. New Mexico in many parts has turned more blue. And I've said, did you watch what happened to Darren White? I will defend Darren. Darren ran in the bluest of blue in this state. Albuquerque's bluer than most people do. Do y'all understand? Albuquerque's bluer than Bernalillo County. We get red as we go through East Mountain up through to Harris and the whole bit. Trump lost Bernalillo County by -22. Ronchetti lost Bernalillo County because we don't have an Albuquerque proper number. We just have Bernalillo County as a proxy. He lost between -18, -20. He did actually slightly better, to his credit. Most people don't realize that Darren lost Albuquerque proper, the bluest of the bluest, that we thought he could lose by 25, he lost by 15. So if you look at all those numbers, the movement is very clear. I don't have to win Bernalillo County. I don't have to win Albuquerque. I've got to stay within double digits, 10 points and around that, and we will win the next governor's office.
Last question, and this gets back to whether you lived in Arizona or here. This is again from Jessica Garate from KRQE. The lawsuit state that
Is she not married to Ryan Kogler? Oh, yeah, that's right. Her husband's the point Doug Turner. Never mind.
Okay. The lawsuit states that you have only voted in New Mexico once in 20 years. The people suing claim that this shows you are not invested in New Mexico. Why haven't you voted here if you care so much about the state?
Jessica, I appreciate your question. And multiple times today and all week long, question asked, question answered. Nothing's going to make her happy until her husband stops sending her text messages, ask Duke this. Done. Next question.
Something about 54 years continuously?
54 years resided continuously. Keywords.
Well, I have to sort of follow up on Jessica's question, and this is me asking, not Jessica now. If you do really care about the direction of a state, and you cared about Mark Marchetti's candidacy, you cared about Darren White's candidacy, why not come here and vote for them?
Many times you couldn't travel freely. There was a thing called COVID, which I was clearly under the watch of the governor about going freely between states. Throughout this time, let's get to the truth of it. I mean, that's really, you're wanting to say what happened in 1910 happened today. In 1910, do you realize what it would take to travel from Albuquerque to Phoenix? What is it, a 3 or 4 or 5 day trip to leave the territory? Right now, because I do have businesses in Arizona and New Mexico, but my entire life, my family, my future has always been in New Mexico. Bottom line. And by the way, I can fly to Phoenix in 42 minutes because I've made the trip. It's a shorter trip than me driving from my house in the Northeast Heights in high desert than driving to Santa Fe. I think we have to realize the reality of what is expected in a modern economy. It happens.
I don't know if that really answered it for me.
That's as much as I'm going to give Jessica.
Okay.
All I could tell you is there are lawsuits sitting before the Supremes. Let it get resolved.
But we're so close to the election. We're not even 3 months, well, we're less than 3 months. And you've got
69 days.
You've got this hanging over your head. I'm sure you'd like to get this resolved, right?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
I think I was telling folks before today's event that I had picked Tuesday in my office pool as to the day the Supremes ruled. So that I've already lost that. But I think we're looking at probably a decision this week. There is a drop-dead date to keep track of. It appears the drop-dead date that we need to start going to print is April 3rd, so no matter what, we are a matter of days away. Do I expect, and I'll make this prediction right here, do I expect this to be the end of it? My opponents will use every way they can, including relationships between people that shouldn't be intervening in this process, to continue to sow confusion, to get you to look every way other than one thing. You want me to talk about policies. That's what you want. You want me to talk about crime and healthcare and education, immigration. Ask them to do the same. But what would they rather talk about? Let's talk about where Duke had lunch today.
How soon will we see TV ads from you addressing this?
I told folks yesterday that we got the official letter from the Secretary of State that is their final, the word they use is final candidates, it's done. Courts have routinely realized, let voters decide, period. Are we going to about ready to campaign in earnest? Be ready. Glad to have dinner and lunch with anyone who tells me they like it or didn't like it. You're going to see billboards. You're going to see radio. You're going to see TV. You're going to see hopefully a race like you've never seen before.
Yes, I might ask one more, because you were mentioning in your remarks that Ronchetti underperformed in southeast New Mexico. You said you're not the typical country club Republican. How, if you're the nominee, would you sort of unify all the Republicans in Albuquerque versus rural New Mexico?
Well, it needs to be understood. There's this confusion, misunderstanding about Republican voters. We tend to think that it's only country club, blue blazer Republicans. That is a complete misstatement. That may be the core of those who might want to participate, for example, in a convention. But if you look at the average Republican voter, they're hard-working oil people. They don't own the oil facilities. They're from Eunice and Jow. They don't own the businesses. They're on Medicaid. They're on SNAP. They've suffered from the same education system that Democrats have suffered. We try to paint them as though these are the wealthy and these are the poor, and the Democrats have always taken care of the poor. Not true. It's the Democrats who've harmed the poor as much as anyone. Union workers. I have union members calling me from the carpenters, the steel workers, the Teamsters saying, Duke, we are Republicans. And they almost sometimes whispered it at first. I'm a Republican. I was having lunch over at the sawmill market. And I took a picture with this young man comes up and he's clearing the table off. And he comes up to me, as God is my witness, he comes up and he says, are you Duke? I said, yes. He goes, I'm a Republican. He goes, I got you, bro. I want you to understand that, I answer your question. Republican voters, rural, urban, educated, less educated, high economic social class, lower incomes, they look like me. And they want a candidate that reflects who they are. Party insiders that keep trying to tell you that we're going to pick the winner. They're going to learn this cycle, they're not going to pick the winner. The voting Republicans will ultimately pick the winner. And it will include a very respectful group of unaffiliated voters. And come November, it's going to be a battle like we haven't seen in a while. And I think it's going to get down, it's not going to be a runaway for Deb or for me. We're going to get down to 2 or 3 point spread. And you're going to see Hispanic Democrats come across. You're going to see conservative Democrats come across. You're going to see people who were disenchanted that Bregman didn't get chosen come across. There is more upside. We have done polling. We have polling. Good news for Deb is she has the highest name recognition out there. I should acknowledge it. It's absolutely true. I'd be lying to you if I said anything different, correct? But we also know because of her high name recognition, she's already capped out. Those who know her have already made up their mind. I'm not a politician. My name recognition's name ID is a little lower, admittedly. But imagine how much room I've got to grow. We're going to win this race.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today, Duke Rodriguez. And I really hope that you, and Dan, there's one more question from the audience that I just wanted to answer. Drexel Douglas asked, when will Greg Hull be here? Moving forward, the next one of these we have is, I believe, Doug Turner on April 14th.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Greg Hull is going to be here. He's going to be here in May, as will Deb Holland and Sam Bregman. And all of those dates will be posted. We just haven't got nailed down the exact dates for a couple of those yet. This series also is not just gubernatorial candidates. We also will have the mayor come in and talk about his third term. Hopefully the new chief of police come in and talk about her vision for the city, as well as the governor to come in and talk about the end of her term and what she hopes to achieve in the final months. So please watch the schedule carefully, come back, and please ask lots and lots of questions. We really loved your questions today. And thank you guys all so much, and thank you especially to Duke for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Duke.